Chairman.
Yeah.
Tonight's meeting is going to feature an actual native from Dutch Hill, Mr. Tom Klopfer. He's going to be citing excerpts from his bestseller, Ancient Idiom. You're going to have participation from the audience. We'll talk about our culture, our foods, medical practices, entertainment. It's an excellent book if you haven't read it. Without further ado,
Sing along if you wish.
Come on, Casey.
Sweet home, the mountains, in the prairies, through the ocean, with home.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Thank you, Stoney, for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to start with Kate Smith tonight because we're going to talk about the past. Kate was the #1 female vocalist for our ancestors. She started radio about 1938, television then, recorded numerous songs. It's typical of what we'll do tonight. Information tonight will be based on this book, The Anthracite Idiom, but it has a subtitle. Sundays we are closed, go around the back. That was an actual sign seen in, we'll bring in terms now from the past as we speak. A beer garden, not a tavern, a beer garden down the line, as opposed to up the line. Terms that came from the streetcar line on the county road. Well, what did that mean? It was against the law to open a bar on Sundays, but the law was flaunted. We didn't have police like Petronchek or somebody to crack down, you know. They would go to the back door, come on in, and the back door may have a sign, ladies entrance. We had those signs, but not too many women went to the bars. Especially like today, the young girls, never, you would never see that. Well, this little gem sold about 3,000 copies. This will bring up another point. It caught the heartstrings of the older people, people who left the area. An example, we'll talk about people tonight. Harold McGowan, family from Park Street. He started working at the Endicott Johnson Shoe Factory, and he worked his way up to president of the corporation. He purchased 12 copies living in Florida. That's just an example of how it caught the strings of the older people. Tonight, interrupt at any time. You want to make a correction, you want to add, or you had an anecdote or something like that. But that idea of the bars not being open, some of our people would be listening to the Phillies baseball game. They couldn't go after sunset. The game would have to be continued at a later date because of the blue laws in Pennsylvania. The book is like a dictionary, but that would be rather boring tonight. Wouldn't it talk about a dictionary? The first entry, for example, is ABCs. Children never learn the alphabet. They learn their ABCs. So what I did was choose some big topics and then went through the book and picked out some individuals. The first big topic was food. When I gave this talk before, twice, it followed sort of a banquet. But Stoney, that's canceled tonight? Okay. Well, I'll still start with food. Just terms, no special order. Our ancestors were rather poor, as you know. They didn't have a lot of lace or linen, but every kitchen table was covered with oilcloth. Very common. You still know what it is, but it was universal back then. People who overate were said to have a tapeworm. These are terms from the book. Dale admits to having a tapeworm, but it's not contagious, so it's okay. Most of our food was baked, manufactured at home. If it was purchased in a store, there was a word, starts with a B, botten. Or if it were bread, it would be called baker's bread. Most of our food had to be kept in the ice box, probably on the back porch. And how would the iceman bring the ice? With the tongs, and he would have an ice pick that would chop. Sometimes on a warm summer's day, there would be pieces of ice in the back of the truck. The boys would sort of snatch a piece to keep cool on the warm summer's day. The family dog may be seen asleep to keep cool under the ice box. Never put warm food in the ice box because it would accelerate the melting of the ice. I'll bet that everyone here tonight, you will not put warm food in the refrigerator, right? That's a carryover from the ice box. But the experts tell us warm, hot food will not harm a refrigerator. You've heard of oleo and margarine. There was another term way back then, starting with the B, butterine. Have you heard that? Well, it was used, but it would be white, pale. Mother would buy it in a bag with 2 or 3 pellets, and it would have to be squeezed and kneaded and rolled because the dairy industry would not allow it to look like butter. They put a tax on the people who sold it, and they just didn't want it. It was competition. But butterine was used in the past. The tea bag was invented 1904. Before that, we had something called the tea balls. My father, into modern times, would refer to a tea bag as a tea ball. Another idea of being carried over. People in the past, especially young people, they never heard the expression coleslaw. We always had, what else, in place of coleslaw? The name, cabbage salad. Mom would get the grater and make the cabbage salad, but the kiddies always waited for the core. What was that called? Have you heard that? These terms are from the book. I'm not making these up, by the way. It's not a story. It was the stump of the cabbage. Little salt on it. It was a nice treat. That was similar to licking the bowl when Mom would make icing. Some of our food, what?
The beaters, the cake batter.
Beaters too.
Some of our food was delivered. Maybe if the backyard garden was out of season, we had a man delivering fruits and vegetables, and he was called Huckster. Do you know the name of the famous huckster in Archbald? Shink. Shink the huckster. He would stop Dutch Hill for you younger people, section of Archbald. The women from various homes would come and look through to take the fruits or vegetables. We had a meat wagon from the Probst Market on Monroe Street, right next to the river, that gray building. That market was famous for one product. People would come from out of the area for their special sausage. Remember that, Sam?
Head cheese?
Well, it had their own German name, Garwurst. The recipe has disappeared. People are talking about it. They love to have it. It may have died with Bobby Probst's Peach Lake, but the recipe is gone. It was, you might say, famous. We had the milkman deliver milk. The 2 empties would be there, probably washed nice and clean by law. And he would leave 2 or 3, whatever. We also, well, some of this milk, we did not have homogenized milk. Pasteurized after 1920, but it was not homogenized. At the top of the bottle there would be a thick curd. Some people remember that? Yeah. Maybe that could be made, used for whipped cream or something like that. I just thought of something else. Back to the Iceman. There were 2 in the town. Louis DeFazio, last house up there, and across the street, it was the first house in Frogtown then, Curtis Bishop. They would deliver. And how much would they drop off? Well, Ma would have a sign in the window. Maybe there'd be a big 2. 3 days later, maybe a 3. That's how he would know how much ice to leave. The dairies were Woodlawn. In this area we had Stevens Brothers. The Woodlawn had a golden Guernsey. I think that was the thick milk at the top. Another character from town working for Woodlawn. He was not able to drive. Harry Munley, a character from Monroe Street. And we are sort of honored tonight. We have a delivery man in the audience. Delivered baked goods. Pepper Krenitsky, the author of the Edgerton book. You'd go door to door, right? Cakes, pastries, and all that. Instead of them going to the store, and they would be bought, not manufactured at home. We had basic stores, salt pork, beef, some of the names, Joe Quinn's, the elder Joe Quinn, Camilo DeAngelis, Jake Mancoos. On Main Street, Nolan's Market, the daughter of the family is still alive. She's married to the oldest man in northeastern Pennsylvania. And Nolan, Moskowitz. Nolan's store was well known over on Main Street at Aunt Molly's Popcorn, that building. Our people kept animals in the backyard. Chickens, especially for the Irish. They loved their fresh egg. The German would have a pig. Why? For pork, to accompany their beloved sauerkraut. And many of our homes had a single cow. What was the common name for the cow in the past, the generic name? Bossy. Here, Bossy. Here, Bossy. That was the cow's name, and the cow would walk up to the back door. This was used for weighing chickens. We sold them from the backyard. This scale is about 100 years old, a chicken scale. Speaking of chicken, the main meal on Sunday was dinner. Your ancestors never used the word lunch. The midday meal was dinner. Third meal, supper. But on Sunday, it seemed they stayed around the kitchen longer. And always the same thing, talking about the parts of the chicken. The part you hated. Do you remember that? The gizzard. The gizzard. Or the wishbone. You know, I have a finger here, you pull one side, I get the wish, you get the bone. And the next one, I'll give the definition, see if you know the term. The The part of the chicken that goes over the fence last. That was known as the Pope's nose. Come, talk of the past. Oh, you'll hear us more tonight that you never heard. Going to the store today, you go to a deli, you get a pound of cheese or a half pound of salami or something. Back then they would go more for financial quotes. I want a quarter's worth of cheese, or I want $1 worth of bologna. Not so much as you would today, a pound of this or a half pound of that. A few words. Well, Brian is not here, but you have grilled cheese. In the past, it could be called toasted cheese, common expression. An example, I went to a wedding reception. I was just a boy, Buffalo, New York. Big deal. I went to the bartender. I wanted a soda. I said, I want a glass of soda. He said, just plain soda? I said, yes. Well, that's what he gave me. Other places, they didn't use soda. We have a drink of soda now. It was pop. Pop or soda pop. And while we're around the home, especially on Saturday afternoons, we'd hear, woo! Who was that? The ragman or the sheenie. And he would collect, not necessarily scrap, that was a new word, junk. He would collect junk. And speaking of door to door, instead of the horn, we would hear a man coming with a bell. And you'd see this old man approaching, bent over.
The umbrella man.
Yes, he'd have a heavy machine on his back, sharpen knives, scissors, and repair umbrellas. The poor umbrella man. Okay, you know, we had these banquets. After people ate, I thought maybe they would need some health advice from our ancestors. There are some old proverbs in the book. One applies here. Sometimes you have to get awfully sick before you get better. Now, the women and children may leave the room when I mention some of these terms. Constipation, for example. Our ancestors had a synonym, you might say. Don't eat all that cheese, it's binding. That was common back then. An upset stomach, people would take baking soda, but it was not called baking soda. Saleratus, you'll hit right. If the worst happened, it was that the person tossed his cookies. That was used. Now the opposite of constipation would be runs, for example. Our ancestors did not have indoor plumbing. They had outhouses, a one-holer or a two-holer. There was an expression dealing with them, maybe speaking with the runs or something. The expression was the back door two-step. When the urge came, the back door two-step. And there's something related here. Our children in the past did not go Halloweening or trick-or-treating. Sammy said, breed joking, yes. And I brought that in here because one of the basic tricks was tipping over the outhouse. That was fun, but except for the person sitting inside. A chest congestion, there would be a concoction called mustard plaster. Now for children, the poor children, they were threatened. It was terrible. Young person, 12, 13, would say, it hurts all over. I don't feel well. You have growing pains. Go lay down. Another problem, it hurts down here. What you need is a good cleaning out. And we had a bombshell back then. Castor oil. Ma would try to disguise it in orange juice. It looked like acid from a chemistry class going in. And come on, you're not finished. More, more, more. It was a terrible taste. Our ancestors had a philosophy, no pain, no gain. They never heard that expression, but that was the way it worked. Sore throat, something terrible called Father John's medicine. That was common. If a person had gas, reflux, he or she would say, that food repeats on me. These were common words, expressions of our ancestors. Like, as I said, children, don't put dirty hands in your mouth. You'll get hydrophobia. Put the fear into these kids. But some people wanted to be healthy. They would take a tonic in the fall made of sulfur and molasses. We made at home, but we had one company in the area, the Bozak family from Oliphant and Scranton. They made a concoction called, McDonough would know this, no? Jorge Vino. If you're talking to any old people, like 90 years old, mention some of these terms. I bet some of your people took that tonic. Jorge Vino. I have here, a person who is sick is said to be ailing. That's the word. Today we hear a lot about condoms. They might be free, right, with the new insurance or something? But they're on public display in our drugstores. In the past, the synonyms were stripper, condom, but they could be purchased not so profusely in the past, but at a vending machine in a restaurant. For example, the Mid-Valley Diner was one of our big restaurants, remember that? Main Street in Dixon City, but where the bank is. But I liked the caveat that was given on the package or the machine. Sold for the prevention of disease only. I wonder if Obama knows that. But that was on the package. Our ancestors were greatly affected by the 1918 Spanish flu. It really devastated people. Some of your people were quarantined, they couldn't leave, and they were buried so quickly after this problem. Scranton had 6,000 victims. 1,000 of them died from the Spanish flu. They had a little proverb back then. I opened the window and in influenza. I opened the door and in flew more. Some definitions. A sore neck would be a kink in the neck. That was common in the past. Today we have hyperactive children, ACDs or whatever, you know what I mean? But, that's another topic. But our people never talked about that. What's the word when you use, like an abbreviation, but something else. Okay, the kids were hyperactive, but one word they used was fidgety. You're fidgety. What's wrong with you? Have you got ants in your pants? Or do you have St. Vitus dance? That was a real neurological condition. But the kids didn't have it, but that was a way to scare them. If there was a real problem, they wouldn't say like, call the police back then. Call Tom Malone. And in Jessup or something, they used the chief's name to scare these kids. The boogeyman will get you. Do they still use that? You do with your
Well, and that, I don't know.
well, you've heard it, yeah.
No.
The boogeyman.
I remember that.
And synonymous with that was Mrs. Dugan
Mrs. Dugan.
will take care of you. She was head of a institution in Scranton. Or the real bad boys, very seldom girls, would be sent to a reform school. And they gave a lot of advice. But back to the flu, it was 1918. We had some of our people dying in World War I. It was winding down. Remember November 11th, 1918. In this town, Archibald, other towns, the siren would sound at 11 a.m. Today you call it Veterans Day. Back then, Armistice Day. We didn't say Veterans Day. And the holiday coming up the end of May, Memorial Day, our ancestors always said, Olivia? Decoration Day. And it was not the long weekend. It was the 30th of May, Tuesday or Friday or Monday, whatever that would fall on. We had some very bad diseases, polio. There was another name for polio, infantile paralysis. We had one hospital in Scranton, Upper South Side, Municipal Hospital. Another terrible disease of the lungs, TB, tuberculosis. Those victims were more or less forced to go to the hospital over West Mountain Sanitarium for tuberculosis. We had mental diseases, of course. You're right about this. But in the book, the old slang words, he or she is not right. He's not all there. Was it at Farview when they had a speaker, he got up and he said, why are we all here? And someone in the back said, well, because we're not all there. But that was an expression. Titched in the head. Cuckoo. He's a nod buck or a nod duck. The place of treatment for those diseases, or the mental disease was, it's the Clark Summit State Hospital now.
The Hillside Home.
The Hillside Home. That's where these poor people would go. We had a cancer-causing machine. A lot of our people went out of town to shop. We had buses every half hour. The stores in Scranton would be open until 9 o'clock on Mondays and Thursdays. Our people would go and shop, see a vaudeville or something like that. But in the shoe store, Lewis and Riley, for example, they had a box, something like this. Put your foot up. Turn the x-ray machine on. We didn't know about cancer then. To see if the shoe was tight or something. X-ray machines in shoe stores. Some of you senior citizens, maybe I'm the only one here, in the old days you'd visit a hospital, open the door, and you'd be struck by the odor. Sammy, you remember that, sir? It was always the same. Every hospital, like combination of ether and formaldehyde, whatever. Oh, with children, the fairy godmother. Do we still have that? But I just wrote the prices down maybe 50 years ago. A tooth, under the pill, 25 cents to $1. It's, what now, how much?
I can tell you.
It's a little higher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Another term, a girl who was sort of masculine was known as a tomboy, and the baby carriage was called the baby buggy. That was also the Irish wheelbarrow, the baby buggy. Okay. The next general topics, ethics, religion, marriage, etc. You all like history, you wouldn't be here. You can't deny what was said in the past, even though there were nasty terms used. Today it's vulgar to use an ethnic slur or something like that. It's not proper. The Welsh could be called cheese eaters, soup strainers. An Irishman would be a Mick. We had terms like Pollock, hunky, wop, dago. They were used. But dago was rather affectionate because it was pronounced Italian, by the way, by Irish and German. The Italian neighbors made dago red wine.
The dirt of the dirt of the wine, the sediment in the wine, that meant you were dirty in Italian. That's what that meant. The sediment in the wine, dago, the sediment. When you call someone a dago, that was a slur. You call them dirty. I never knew
But
that.
the wine was not a slur, it was tasty.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, but I never knew that.
They felt good after that. But the grapes in the backyard would come from the grapevine, never a grape arbor. That was too sophisticated a word. And apologies to Miss Cindy. Catholics were called mackerel snappers. And then these Catholics would turn around and call someone a black Protestant. Terms used in the past. And speaking of the some Italian words, we had an organization called the Black Hand. Secret type organization. They never marched down in a parade. You know, like Giuseppe Francisco, he's Black Hand. I know fix you, but my organization fix you. It was that type of pressure. Well, we had the Molly Maguires. They killed people. They came as close as German. There was a death up there. From 1907, Scranton Times, it said the Italian priests are waging a war on the Black Hand because they didn't like what they were doing. The Italians had something for the evil eye. What was the name of that? The Malocchio superstition, yeah. I grew up near Starlight. It was Caesar's Bar and Restaurant then. The Italian men in the back, this Delaware Street was not paved, they would play, we pronounce it Balla Voce. You don't see that anymore, right? Not and locally, maybe at Anthracite Museum or something, that park, but not locally by local men. They also had a game inside, the Italian men. The door would be open, you know, deep-voiced coal miners. They would stand in a circle and throw fingers. Did you ever hear that or see that?
Even odd.
It was called morda.
Yeah.
And it's quattro, cinque, sette, whatever, to match fingers, right, Phil, somewhere? Like that. Someone jokingly later said that was Italian inventory, but it wasn't. Uno, due, tre, quattro. No, it was a game. Morda, Balla Voce. I have a Polish term here. At Christmas, you get those wafers. Polish name?
Oplatki.
Oh, platki. That comes, it's directly Polish, isn't it? Yeah. From the book of the A's, stupid person, from the Irish Gaelic word, anawish. Kathleen?
Amadan.
An Amadan. Well, I think of the A's, there's a bottle there if you can't reach it. They weren't marbles back then, but alleys. Alleys. If you want a souvenir of an alley, you can take one or two when you're leaving. A lot of our Irish became cops. You've heard of Paddy Wagon? Some of the old Irish police stations were known as the Irish Clubhouse because of all the Irish there. The Irish were most superstitious. These superstitions from the Gaelic word pishrog, P-I-S-H-R-E-A-G. You've heard it, Deacon? Mm-hmm. Yeah. P.J. Burke told me that. I didn't make it up or read about it. P.J. Burke was one of our characters in town. He was a #1 horseman. And he was also, very unique, the only school bus driver in the town for about 30 years. You might say, what about the poor kids walking? We had schools, Chestnut Street, Catholic school here, Riverside, State Street, Einan. It was down at the end of Main, right? It became a dress factory, that gray building. Green Hill, right up this way. Number 5, Nip Heckman Country, they had their own school. And Nebraska. So you see, they didn't need a bus. But for the high school, PJ about 3:10, take the kids to Einan, come back, take the students to Nebraska. But some of these pishrogs from the ferries, don't shake your tablecloth out at night or the fairies will get you. We actually had a ferry field down on Laurel Street. You all have heard of that. But I just heard recently that there was a complaint about that. Some people or whatever went to the priest And he apparently contacted the Pope about 1900. I forget his name, Deacon.
Would have been
Leo
Comerford,
13th or whatever.
Would have been Comerford, the pastor, in 1900.
Well,
Father Comerford.
he had an inroad with the Pope, probably. Yeah, he was powerful. Father Comerford, for example, a character in town. If he'd walk down the street and a male, you'd have to tip your hat to him. He'd give you a whack with the cane. And he had a quotation, yeah, Rocky Glen in the summer, rocking the baby in the fall. That was words from Father Comerford. Well, anyway, the fairy field ended, maybe from the Pope or whatever. But they had the banshees. Remember the howl of the banshees at night? And the leprechauns. They were the good people because they knew where the gold was buried. Some of these pish rogues, no swimming before St. John's Day. Wash new clothes before wearing. Don't wash white clothes in the month of May. And you know the one about pork on New Year's Day and things like that. Another, a green Christmas means a full or a fat cemetery. Check it out next Christmas. You know, if there's a lot of greenery, no snow, green Christmas, full cemetery. Another one at a wake. Oh, I was going to say wake. Corpse house. And it was worse than that. It was a corpse house. If the corpse had soft skin, there was going to be another death to follow shortly. A Polish superstition that a marriage, let's say that's the altar, if a candle went out on the bride's side, someone was about to die shortly after. Likewise on the groom's side. One of the terrible fairies was the pukas. They were ugly. They could resemble anything. Jimmy Stewart, remember the movie Harvey? That was a puka, the rabbit. Okay. Let's mention a little about religion. What was the name of this school, now from the past? How would you refer to it?
Sister school.
Yes, that's the word I wanted. Let's say, Cindy goes to the sister school. This was second grade, by the way. Oh, we forgot to mention, lavatories, they're open tonight at the end of the hall beyond the third grade classroom. The lavatories are down there. We had nuns, of course. Every grade had a nun. A young girl who became a nun was said to take the veil. There was another expression, born with the veil. Really? Especially with women, it is said they had psychic powers when they got older. Born with the veil, when a child is born, it's the membrane, and the name of that, Judy? It's a caul, C-A-U-L. Some of our ancestors used that as a good luck charm, you know, rope wrapped up, as they came across the pond, so they would not drown. Our people were close to the church, religious, but there's one mistake they made. Fridays. What were Fridays? Fast days? Fridays are not fast days. A Friday is a day of abstinence. Deacon, back me up? Yeah. So that was a mistake, but just common language in the past. Speaking of religion, the Infant of Prague. That's the Irish pronunciation, Prague. Maybe you can't see it, but right down here, behind the tape, is a dime. Our religious people, a statue, and then superstition. And our women, they went to fortune tellers. The number one was in Peckville, Mrs. Harkins, across from the Alpine ice cream. She was number one. We had stuff like that. My mother took me to Mrs. Green. I had some childhood warts. She did the incantations with string for me to get rid of the warts.
Did it work?
I knew you were going to ask that. I would say time is the healer of all ills. Please God, I didn't believe it. Well, I was so young, you know. Another word that we don't hear much, we don't hear at all. The mass is over here during the week. The last one about 8:30. They dimmed the lights, and we'd see as we were leaving a young girl walking up to the altar. There were railings in the church then. After she had a baby, the word was churched. Common word in the past, but it's not done now, right? It's like a purification after giving birth. All right, something on marriage. The basic rule was marry your own kind. There were exceptions. Slovak, marry Slovak. Protestant, marry Protestant. That's what they believed in. Another word, after the marriage, the reception, the bride and groom would retire to their quarters, but a crowd would gather outside, making all kind of noise, pots and pans. Alice, did you ever hear the word?
Chivalry.
Chivalry, yes. That was used by our ancestors. How did they meet? They would go to dances. Church dances, Rogers Hall in Einan. Chapel Lake had Elmo's Ballroom, Hotel German, places like that.
Quality Hall.
I forgot, you asked, Colley's Hall, right down here on the corner. But we also had something, we didn't have personal columns in the newspaper. You know, I want to meet a nice lady who knows how to make kielbasa, something like that. No, we had something called the Lonely Hearts Club organization. It was popular. To illustrate, 300 people from a New Jersey chapter had their outing in Oliphant, 1939. See, they could intermingle. Maybe some of our ancestors met like that. And I don't think they could give phone numbers. We didn't have much in the way of phones then. The most popular song at a wedding reception was, in my opinion, I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old dad. I have the words here if anybody wants them. You can pick it up on the internet. It's very, the reception's in the backyard maybe. Borrow the chairs from the undertaker at that time, or the Legion or the church, and tap a keg, and I want a girl. They love that song. Polish weddings. They were almost as long as an Irish wake. Dancing with the bride. I had a figure here, a girl made $160 over a period of days, maybe. Young girls would have a hope chest, not so much today, right? You know what it is?
No, I know.
Oh, you know,
Yeah.
okay. They would save linen and towels and everything, be prepared for their marriage. An illegitimate child was said to be born on the wrong side of the sheets. That's what they said. But I want to mention something back on health. Our drugstores, the number one in the area was Foots. It's a salon now, but we didn't have the word salon in the past. It would be a beauty shop. Foots was unique. They had an ice cream booth in the center of the building. Collie, did you ever have ice cream there? Yeah, the sundae, the butterscotch, oh, delicious. But what I was remarking about, it was always accompanied by, yes, the sundae, always accompanied by the glass of water. Foots also collected a utility bill. Anybody remember that? I heard it over there. Light bill. We didn't use the term electric bill, light bill. And where would we pay our water bill if we wanted to stay in town? Mr. Prodigo's home, that driveway there. Joe Walsh was our waterman. Any water problems, Colley's Dam or something, Joe Walsh. a little aside, he married late in life. Mary Pryal. Pryal's store was over on Main Street. Mary Pryal was the #1 organist at St. Thomas. 3 masses during the week. She may have played 3 daily. Back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, where did we pay our gas bill? There was no gas. Our people did not have city gas. Some people had the bottled gas in the rear of the home, but not about 1960 maybe it came around. Okay, the second drugstore close by, Charlie Grogan's. Charlie was the grandfather of our tax collector. He had a philosophy: if you go in with a prescription and want some medicine, I don't have that, but I have something just as good. That was his philosophy. A little souvenir. This is an adding machine purchased at Charlie Grogan's, about 1950. It's about 60, 65 years old now. He had a glass containers on the wall, and I spied it, and Mom had to buy it for me. An adding machine. Very crude. Speaking of Charlie Grogan's, the entrance was where Bud's restaurant is now, as opposed to Bud's bar. Have any of you ever noticed the bar, no, excuse me, the door between those bar and restaurant?
Yeah.
There is a door.
My aunt had a,
That led us up to our family town doctor, rather, Dr. Harold Colleran. He died about April 1st, 1960. We were without a doctor. So some people encouraged Dr. Mackerel to come in. He opened over here in the Dzerzky home. So he took over there. What did our forebears do for pastime culture? The talkies came about 1920, the first one being the jazz singer, Al Jolson. Before that we had silent, and we would have piano players for the silent. Let's say you have a cowboy chasing the robber or something, maybe Rose Boland, she'd be the piano player. Speaking of piano playing, radios about programs about 1930. One of the first was The Lone Ranger. Do you know the name of that tune?
William Tell Overture.
That was the William Tell Overture, a very classic tune for the Lone Ranger. And then we had Fibber McGee and Molly. And then we had one like to say, hey, Kingfisher, where are you going? Going out dining tonight, Kingfisher? What was that? Amos and Andy, our forebears like that. And we had newspapers. The Archibald Citizen was a great newspaper, and other towns had newspapers. Our comics, our people loved to read Blondie, Mutt and Jeff, Popeye. They would go to parks. The #1 park, church excursions or something, was Rocky Glen. And Newton Lake, 2 over the mountain here, Lake Ladore and Lake Ariel. But they were frequented because they had rail traffic, Ladore and Ariel, Lake Ariel. We had libraries around the area, cultural societies. Archibald had an opera house. So all the people were not, as you say, dumb coal miners. And our coal miners had culture too. Some of us older people, we can remember, they'd be out of work about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? The coal miners. They never worked a full year. They had time.
Where was the Opera House? Where was the Opera House?
That was down around Colley's building, wasn't it? The Opera House,
Or was it down Monroe Street?
was it?
That's where number 1 is built.
I believe it was on Monroe Street.
Father Matthew's Opera House? Yeah, it was down around where,
I'm going to mention Father Matthew coming up.
yeah.
Our people, more so probably, had pianos and the like in the home. They had small instruments. You have one, the Jews,
Jar. Jews harp.
Jews harp, and we would have, you'd call it a mouth organ, we'd call it that. You would call it harmonica, but people had them. But the piano, in Lent, it would be closed. No playing the piano in Lent. Our dances, the turkey trot, the foxtrot, the Charleston, and the jitterbug. The jitterbug was defined to get in the groove and go to town. At these big dance halls. After the prom, well, in our lifetime, you'd go to Smith's or Thomas's in music. Those were the hangouts for after prom activity. Some education words. Some of our minors went to night school. That was called continuation school. There was a very important boy in the 8th grade. He would have a belt and a badge. He was known as the patrol boy. Very prestigious, the patrol boy. Teachers, now we have in-service days and 2-hour delays, which we didn't have. But in the past, we call them Teachers Institute. That today may be the in-service day, something similar to that. People played quoits, went to fortune tellers. We loved the parades. Back to refrigerators. My family bought our first one from Tom Spillane. They came about 1950. We purchased our first television from Tom Spillane. Spillane's Hardware, and if you're into history, the first Spillane store was where Doris's Beauty Shop is, Main Street, on that side. But Tom Spillane, well, first of all, I brought some little prizes for tonight. Maybe someone could answer this. Our first television station, the call letters, the number, and the town or city. Who knows?
Binghamton, WNBF, Channel 12.
That's right. Good one.
Channel 12, yeah.
Channel 12, WNBF, out of Binghamton. But back to Tom Spillane. On Academy Street, we have that building with the stone blocks from the story. Out behind that, there's a plateau, that mountain. He erected a large pole with an antenna. He brought down the wire. So he was one of the first cable innovators in the area. We had minstrels, and they were held up here on the 3rd floor. I think all of you know, maybe some don't. It was the parish hall. Names there would be Michael Craig, Claire Kenny, Gerald Barrett. They were the big stars of our minstrel shows upstairs. I wrote something here because I remember it from walking home from school. You know, children, when we didn't have buses, we did have to walk some distance, passing the time, maybe telling dirty stories or something like that. But there was one little ditty, I wonder if anybody remembers. Chicory chick, chalock chala, checkerwalonica, inna bananica, balikawa, can't you see that chicory chick is me? Cindy, would you repeat it?
Chicory chick, chalak, checkalarumi, and a bananica, balakawalaka, can't you see the chicory chick is me?
Very good. You know, that was a common little ditty sung by our children. Some of our activities was not of the best kind. A lot of our people, no, the Irish, let's be truthful, the Irish were known to drink more so than the other races, the ethnics. In fact, I saw a thing One young man went to convention, and the priest told him about drinking. He said, that's a problem we Irish have. But it was more so with the Irish probably, but I'm not criticizing. In the book, there are some synonyms for drinking. Some of these people were referred to as, he's an old drunk. But we also had the expression, it's the sickness. See? Dichotomy there. And we don't have these old drunks now as we had in the past. Like in this town, they'd be on the street, maybe falling down. We would find them lying in the woods.
There's less bars.
What?
There's less bars now than there were.
Oh, we had 32 bars in Archibald, something like that. But I don't think that's the reason. I think it's a different mentality.
And
Young people.
speakeasies.
Oh, speakeasies. But we didn't call them speakeasies. What did we call these where the men would go for a quick drink? It was called a hole in the wall. And I know of one, Lena from Lawrence Street. She ran a hole in the wall for our miners. The miners' drink, by the way, was the Boilermaker, the shot in the beer to clear the throat after all that dust. But here are some synonyms. The drunk, the sickness. He's on a tear, on a binge, a bender, a jag. And what was terrible was the crying jag. Oh, terrible. He's plastered. He's pie-eyed. He's soused. He's in his cups. This takes care of all of ours, maybe. He's a toper. The Irish made their own. It had a terrible smell. It was pochine. Hungarians had something called polinki. That was their own drink. But drinking was a problem. They even had these temperance societies. Number one in the area was the Father Matthew Society. We had a branch, as Deacon said, over on Main Street, right? But there was another way drinking was attempted to be stopped. There was trouble in the home. Well, first of all, maybe we had a nagging wife, okay. But the man of the house was himself. So much drinking, it caused disruption in the home. We had very few divorces. Where could the woman go? Couldn't go back home. Maybe the father was killed in the mines. In fact, she had to leave home to get married. So she put up with it. Himself then would be forced to go to the parish priest and
Take the pledge.
take the pledge. That was relatively common. And another one of our low-life activities, we had some brothels, houses of prostitution. I don't know of any in town. Maybe, oh, you want to mention some, but no names?
No, I knew of one when I was a kid, and that's
Yeah. Do you know, could you tell us a street? Or?
Main Street.
Wait, I'm coming to Main Street. Maybe I have something to say on Main Street. Okay. Well, what was the nickname, the slang word from the book, let's say, that the boys would use? It was called a cat house. That was slang. Scranton was notorious. In 1930, they had about 40 of these houses of prostitution. It was so bad, the commander at Tobyhanna forbade his soldiers to go into Scranton.
That was in World War II, which was in 40, 41.
Yeah, well, it lasted more than 1 year, yeah. But this is the example I have. In that year, there were 40, and it maybe held steady. The young man could be entertained for the price of $1, maybe throw in a drink with that. Speaking of Main Street, across from where I live, Chucky Lindy's bar. His idea was, though, BYOG, bring your own girl. It was not like you go and pay. he provided rooms upstairs. And when I was young, I could see someone getting off the bus. They would go to Chucky Lindy's. Okay, we have a few minutes. Okay, just finishing up some quick terms. Cigarette smoking. The brands were Lucky Strike, Camel, Pall Mall. And we had people making their own. It was said to they would roll their own. Half and Half was a big name in tobacco. Clark and Snover, Prince Albert, that big red can, you probably saw some. There was a little joke. Someone called the store, do you have any Prince Albert in the can? Yeah, well, why don't you let him out? You know, jokes like that. But Prince Albert was a big name. But these cigarettes, our vending machines were not sophisticated back then. Cigarettes pack cost 23 cents. What is the machine to do? You could take a quarter, maybe like that machine for the condoms, take a quarter, and you'd get a cigarette pack with 2 pennies on the side, because it was 23 cents a pack. Some terms quickly. Beggars. We had beggars door to door. You haven't seen them lately. We have poor people, but not as they were in the past. And they did not necessarily want money. They might want a sandwich. Go to the back door, Mom would make them a sandwich. They'd go on their way. In the borough, we had various officials, and we had one official with a particular name. It's not used anymore. Mike Zielinski would be that man now. Yes, Pathmaster. Yeah, and that was common. He's the pathmaster of the borough. I remember Mr. Wright from Salem Road. He was our pathmaster. A very definite term. We had carnivals, especially down in the ferry field. Carnivals. The gypsies would come to town. And the police were authorized by state law. Get the gypsies out. In fact, they were accused of stealing chickens up on the Wildcat. They had that reputation. Our people would not go picking blueberries. They would go picking huckleberries. And especially our Eastern European women would have the babushka. I don't see much of that anymore, but they're still around. Babushka. The couch or sofa could be referred to as the Davenport. Just want to see if something else went through. I think covered it all. People who spoke with the brogue, or maybe broken English, it was said, he, she, just got off the boat. The banana truck. That came later, I think, didn't it? Okay, as the book is coming to an end, we talk about life coming to an end. Someone who was close to death or had passed over, it was said he or she was a goner. And if a person is quite sick, no hope perhaps, he would say, well, how are you doing? I have one more clean shirt. Now, I had a neighbor, some of you know, maybe Bobby, Freddie Rogeri.
Sure.
How are you doing? Mort, Mort, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
That was his answer, Mort. Death,
Death.
He was expecting death. But then these people, what did they do? They upped and died. Common expression. They could get about 100 years, get a rough box coffin, maybe $8. Hardwood, though, maybe $11 or $12 100 years ago. Did I tell you the story about the Lonely Hearts picture? No. This is a joke. Probably never happened. But if it did, it would be funny. This man sent his picture into the Lonely Hearts Club. We spoke about that earlier, about the Lonely Hearts Club. He sent the picture to headquarters. Dale heard this. About a week later, the picture was returned to him with a little note on it. It said, sorry, we're not that lonely. But it never happened, but it could possibly. All right, the book ends with a poem, if I may end, and then you can have questions or what. The poem goes like this. And now we are aged and gray, Maggie. The trials of life nearly done. Let us sing of the days that are gone, Maggie, when you and I were young. How about some comments, questions, stories? Stone? Anything?
Speaking about food, when I was a child, Stephen's Dairy, when they would come around with the milk, they had a big, like a horse pulling the dairy cart. Big old white horse. This is back in, I'm aging myself.
You're that old? A horse with the what?
Yes, Stephen's Dairy from Carbondale, yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned it.
It was about 1949, somewhere around there, 1950.
Somewhat related. In my lifetime, I saw our friend Nip walking a cow down Main Street. In my time. Bobby?
That was supposed to be Kifalobi discount. And he was taking it out the ridge.
Off the ridge. Einen was the ridge. We go out the ridge, you know, Ridge Road. Bobby?
And the cows used to come down with their bells on, in the field where Quinn's is at. But I don't know, do you remember we used to have, the meat man used to come?
Oh, before you got here, we talked
did
all
you
about
talk?
that.
Oh, okay.
Propst's meat wagon, the
Right,
huckster.
right.
Yeah.
Baker, everything.
Bob, did you remember the name of the huckster?
Joe,
No, one more popular than him.
My huckster was Anton Orme.
Shink was up in Dutch Hill.
oh, Shink, yeah.
Shink. And
Anton Orme used to come around.
was he
When I
from
was a kid,
south,
that was in the
from
60s.
Dark Valley? If you know where,
Joe
what's the
liked-
name of the creek? Not, we have White Oak, Laurel Run. That yellow house set back? You don't know?
Arrigos?
He was in that family, a different name. He was a huckster, yes.
Joe, oh, it's Joe Sakari.
Carey, yeah. But Shink was our big huckster,
See,
yeah.
Joe Sakari lived up on Carbon Street.
Well, he was a brother-in-law, I think, that they sort of worked together, yes.
Remember Cure the Milkman?
Oh, yes. Cure, the milkman. I don't know if he was for Stevens or his own.
His own, Lou Cure.
Cure.
Lived with my grandfather's.
First name was
Lou,
Lou.
L.M. Cure.
L.M. Cure. He was a typical farmer. I'm not offending anybody. Hillbilly type.
Yep.
You don't like that? Cure. And he was loved by most people. A big name in the Stevens local family was Wilson family from Green Hill area. They worked for Stevens, I think, just about ran it. How about comments, questions, stories?
My grandfather used to use white gas on his knee for arthritis. My grandfather did. He put white gas in a bottle and rub it on his knee for his arthritis.
And a common cure
Yeah.
was horse liniment.
Here's WD-40.
Did you ever smell that? That's quite strong. Horse liniment for arthritis type.
Is that right?
Another huckster we had was named Pardon Me.
Yes.
Pardon me.
Excuse me?
Every house he went to, he'd say, pardon me, would you like these, or, pardon me, always pardon me.
We'll finish.
His
I'll
first
comment
name was
on it.
Tom, I forget his
Going
last
door to
name.
door, there was a man, he was a paid man, like with a coat on, like almost a suit. Strawberries. He was a middleman. He would come around to our homes.
On the cuff, you remember on the cuff? My grandfather, someone had all money, he would write on his shirt. On the cuff, he would write it. He told my grandmother, don't wash that shirt until I'm done taking it off. On the cuff. You ever heard that? On the cuff.
Yeah, on the cup.
You ever heard it, right?
Yeah.
My grandfather used to do that. He would write it on his cuff.
Yeah.
On the cup.
But we could go to the stores.
Say that one?
Everybody
I mentioned the
was-
stores.
Tell them that.
A credit. What was the word for credit? I think, Pepper, you wouldn't always get paid, right? T-I-C-K, tick?
Tick.
Yeah,
Tick.
on tick. And when you go to the store, Camille, DeAngus, Jake Mancus, whatever. Every 2 weeks, miners got paid twice a month, I think, not every 2 weeks. You pay the bill in the grocery store, and the grocer would give you a cake, something like that.
Cake, oranges.
Yeah. And Bobby, before you got here, I mentioned, in the olden days, they'd go and they'd say, I want $1 worth of bologna or something.
Yeah.
You know, they would say, I want that 3/4 of a pound or something, you know? And then the poor grocer, the machines weren't too sophisticated. He'd have to figure out, well, if it's $1 worth, what would that weigh on the scale, you know, instead of a quick pound?
Did you do Kiss My Feet and 2 Feet Higher?
That's in the book.
Yeah, I know.
That's, who does it apply to? I forget. Oh, when you want to tell somebody off, something like that. I have a lot of them in the book. Like a homely neighbor. She has a face that would sour a pan of milk. They're in the book like that.
Did you talk about the umbrella man?
Yeah.
You talked about
Well,
that?
we mentioned him.
Ringing the bell?
Yeah. Did you know his
What
real
about his
name?
neighbor Wilhelmina?
I did him like, did you talk about the Sheeny?
Remember Wilhelmina?
Who's that?
Talking about whatever Mr. Colley said.
What's her name?
I don't know, I didn't say it either. Somebody says Wilhelmina maybe?
Billy.
Oh, Billy.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever,
Her name was Wilhelmina, but everybody called her Billy.
did you ever talk,
Last name was Constantina.
Huh?
Billy, her last name was Constantina.
Yeah, her husband was Portuguese.
yeah, they used to call her Billy the Nigger. And that's what it was in Archibald. It was Billy the Nigger. Roger Daly, she was down and I don't know where she was, in a home, right? He called up, I don't know if anybody heard this, they wanted to give her a citation from the town, she was 100 years old. Is Billy the Nigger there, right? Well, the lady almost jumped through the telephone. But then Roger told her, he said, that's what we always called her.
Yeah, she'd walk by my house and we'd say, hi, Billy. It wasn't it wasn't mean.
No,
In fact, Joe Quinn paid for her funeral. He paid for the cemetery. She's buried up in the Protestant cemetery. Before you got here, Bobby, we mentioned all that Pollock, Hunky, Dago, Dago Red,
yeah.
things like that, the wine. Were you here then when Pullman said, give me a run? The Dago Red was the bottom of the...
Right, that was a ethnic slur, that means you were dirty. My grandfather told me that. He said the bottom of the line was your dirt, oh yeah.
You know about Dago Red, the grapevine, yeah.
That's what,
Yeah. Stony, whatever, is it time?
Yeah, oh, it was great. A lot of fun with it.
Anything else, stories, anything like that? Okay. Thank you for coming, you're a great audience.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Great as always.
10-4.